There's always that concern, is this the final call to gather? And I don't know that I'm making that kind of a statement from the Lord to say, you better be here tomorrow, because if you're not, you're in deep trouble. We all know that our society in many ways is falling apart. Our government is doing some crazy stuff. Our financial burdens of the United States is probably on shaky ground. I don't see Richard Pears. He could probably confirm that one. Things are not as good as they ought to be, or we would like to have them be. But does that mean that if you are, for some reason, still in one of the outlying isolated areas, that you are somehow or another, like I said, in some kind of trouble because you can't get here? And that's really what I tried to address in this article, and I encourage you to pick up your Hastings Times and to read it. Some of this came from a sermon that I gave at the In-Town Reunion on October 31st of 2021. And I had the pleasure at that time of providing a sermon at the In-Town Reunion. And at the Salvation Army Service Center, where we were having the reunion, there was a sign behind my back that said, "Gather." And I've noticed that here, even in our auditorium, this conference center, there's a sign down here on the floor that says, "Gather." So there are not new words by any means to you as Latter-day Saints that you ought to gather. However, there may be some benefits of gathering that you ought to consider. Now, granted, there's several sections of the Doctrine and Covenants that talk about gathering, and at some time that final call when, quote, "It is expedient to me, Christ, in the meantime I have work to do. It is expedient to me in Christ that you come." That is from section 45, verse 15a. I still think that the final call is in our future. Section 150, verse 3, tells us that some of the horrible conditions are already at our door. Can you not see, quote, that political upheaval, economic adversity, decline in morality, and even natural calamities are at your door? That was in 2005. Section 154, verse 6a says that the gathering of my people, though not yet, will soon come. That was in 2010. Section 167, verse 1 says, "For your protection from the effects of Babylon, it is urgent that you gather closer together geographically and spiritually." And I asked the question in the article, can it get worse than it is now? Well, yes, it probably can. However, please consider that when the time comes and the aspects of the world listed above have taken place, it may be too late to be able to move to Zion in an orderly way. By gathering now, you can better assist in the work of the final days, and you won't have to gather in haste under adverse conditions. Food for thought. I think there are some benefits to being here in the center place, such as coming together more often for theological education, quorum meetings. I know we have the ability to pick up the phone and listen in, share, or do a team meeting or a Zoom meeting for our quorum meetings. But even when I've done those, it seems like it's uncomfortable sometimes to really sense and feel just how all of those who are participating in the meeting are responding. And maybe you have a little bit of trouble feeling like you want to raise your hand and say, what about this or what about that? coming together in person, I guess is what I'm saying, is better than being on the phone. I realize that sometimes that's the best we can do. My second thought was the School of the Prophets. If we're able to bring that into being, I really see that the School of Prophets will be something that will take place here and would not be broadcast or would not be done over the phone, just for the intimacy of the Spirit and the people who are there. And my third thing is, if Jesus comes to the New Jerusalem, you will be here. If you take a look at 3 Nephi, the 10th chapter, verses 1 through 8, it talks about 3 visitations. That's not new terms to the church. The first visitation is Jesus Christ coming to the New Jerusalem. Second visitation is to the people in Old Jerusalem. The third visitation is when Christ comes to all, meaning all the peoples of the earth. And if that's the case, then at some point that promises there that Christ will come to the New Jerusalem to help bolster us up, to strengthen us, to teach us, to be able to do the things that we need to do before the final coming. I would like to be here when he comes. And I think it'd be a lot easier to be able to be where he is if I live fairly close. Now, in that section, 168, where it refers to strengthening the center place is critical. I think being here is definitely makes it easier to teach. And in 167, it said that you should gather together closer geographically and spiritually. I would venture to say that places like Indiana and Sperry, where there are large congregations, where you can get together and have the services and the education and the programs that you want to have there, are probably still viable. But we have found over the years that I have been watching the church that some of our smaller congregations are getting smaller and smaller for various reasons. And when the time comes and you feel like you need to be here, I would encourage you to consider that here is where you need to be. So, final comment. Is the call on the 31st of October and the call in the sections of the Doctrine and Covenants, that last final call together from the elect of the four corners of the earth, as suggested in section 34? No, it's not. But maybe it's time to think about making the plans, trying to find ways to get here. I know when Cindy and I moved to Independence, it was not necessarily an easy thing to do. If you consider having to move your house, or sell your house, I'm sorry, and pack up all your stuff and so forth, it takes some time to get here. So I encourage you to think about, when is it right for you to be here? It's 5 minutes to 4. I promised you I would talk about those 3 things, and I have done that. So the next activity on the list then is tonight's preaching service. Brother Roger Tracy, go Roger, is giving us our sermon tonight, and I would encourage you to come back and enjoy his exuberant style of sharing the gospel with us. So thank you, and we'll see you at 7 o'clock.